Okay. So I think works fine now. Perfect. Okay. Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Automate Daily Task with Orcharhino Job Templates. My name is Martin Grundei and I'm a consultant at the Atix AG. My field of work encompasses the automation of processes relating to data centers. This includes configuration management, Ansible, Puppet Salt, cloud topics, and of course our lifecycle management tool Orcharhino, which we will use for this webinar today. As the name suggests, today's webinar is centered around the question, how can one automate daily tasks related to your data center? This includes, for example, patching and upgrading your hosts. And to answer this question, we will have a closer look at the Orcharhino and so-called job templates to achieve this. For your general overview, the webinar is separated into two different parts. In the first part, I will give an introduction to automation. Why should one use automation? What is meant with automating the processes for your data center? And the second part will be a live demonstration of our Orcharhino. I will show how to use the Orcharhino to automate the deployment of a host and how to use job templates within Orcharhino. If you have any questions, please ask them in the questions section. And be aware that there's a short delay, so I'm not able to answer your questions immediately, but about 1 to 2 minutes later. I will address any open questions at the end of the two different parts. Right. So let's start with the presentation. Okay, here we have the slides. So let's start with the presentation and the question, what is automation and why is it so advantageous to use? Well, everyone knows this problem during maintenance. You have many repetitive tasks all at once, have to take care all of your hosts are up to date, are working properly in your data center. And attending to these tasks can be very tedious. And of course, if you do them manually, error prone. So it would be advantageous to just have a few, let's say, workflows you can apply to your repetitive tasks. And of course, the big advantage of this would be that you can do this in a defined manner without the risk to introduce any errors by hand. So how can we achieve this in the tasks we have at hand? So let's, for example, look at the deployment of your host. You all probably know this scenario. A colleague from another department informs you that you need he needs a bunch of new servers, let's say 10 new servers. And of course, time is of essence, and they want them immediately. Well, you could deploy these servers manually, but this does not only consume a significant amount of your work time, but you might potentially miss a critical configuration for one of these servers if you do it by hand. You could then, instead of deploying them manually, it would be far better to have some kind of let's say GUI or table where you can insert a few key points and press, for example, a button, and all your hosts would deploy it automatically. That would alleviate much of the stress you feel at the moment. And how could you do this? Well, you normally have some kind of deployment environment. Let it be a virtualization environment like libvirt, OVIRT, or VMware, or Proxmox. Or you have a cloud environment like Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud Services. And you can use the tools deployed by them, so you can automate the deployment of your hosts without the risk of introducing manual errors. So this would be one example. The next one is on this slide. Yeah, here. So we go, short delay. So another example, let's say you have to switch your DNS in your static networks, the IP of your DNS. Now you have to change the DNS configuration for every single host in this network. Again, you could do this by hand or PolyShell, but instead of that, you could use, for example, a configuration management tool like Puppet, Ansible, or SaltStack, which automatically deploys your DNS configuration from a central location. So you could, for your configuration management, use one of these tools and automate your configuration management of your hosts. Another example where you could use automation in your data center. Let's look at the patch management of your host. You might have the situation that you have hundreds of different hosts in your data center, and each one with distinct operating system. You might have some Ubuntu hosts, you might have some SUSE hosts, perhaps Debian, Red Hat, Oracle, CentOS, whatever you want. And now you have to ensure that an operator that all your hosts are patched regularly and are up to date. Of course, doing this by hand is enormous workload, and doing so might result in some servers with very old packages on them. So it would be far better to have a system which enables you to patch your hosts automatically in a manner that you can define the precise state of your servers regarding the software you deploy on them. So it would be better to be able to define some kind of release cycle, for example, by defining a test, a production, and a development environment where you can provide us a detailed, let's call, snapshot in time of your software you want to deploy. And then, of course, sorry. And then, of course, you want to test the software you want to host at first for a few servers, for example, in your test environment, and then roll out after you confirm that it's safe to use on your hosts to the production environment. So, and therefore you can use the software which is associated with your different operating system distributions. For example, you could use Ubuntu Landscape, SUSE Manager for SUSE if you want to, or Red Hat Satellite for Red Hat. So you see, you have a very wide area, a whole suite of possible tools you can use to automate your data center. So, but what if you want one central solution, one central configuration management tool, or better, lifecycle management tool, which encompass all of these tools, which can orchestrate all of these tools at once? Well, and this is what orcharhino can do for you. Orcharhino can integrate all of these different tools and into one solution, and can deploy, configure, and release your hosts. So what does this mean in detail? So, for example, you can pick all of these operating systems here, can pick your preferred operating system and deploy it to your platform you want to. For example, Proxmox, VMware, KVM, by selecting the corresponding provider in orcharhino. Of course, you can also pick a cloud solution like Microsoft Azure, AWS or Google Cloud platforms, and combine this with your configuration management tool you want to use. Let it be Puppet, SaltStack, or Ansible. And we therefore, so this all you can combine with the patch management, release management of Cartello within Orcarino to ensure that your repositories and your software is up to date. And we at edX want to support you at the automation and operation of your data center. So regarding Orcarino, we offer different services like consulting. So this ranges from formulating an initial concept for cluster automation to its implementation and problem solution. We offer trainings for Orcarino to help you start with it. And of course, we have our support where you get access to by using the Orcarino. And we have an engineering team which develop our plugins and our software and is in constant contact and exchange with the Foreman community where Orcarino is based on. And this whole concept, this whole package is the Orcarino. So if you want a detailed insight of what I just talked about, you can have a look at the Orcarino documentation, which you can find here, or you can register for an Orcarino demo right under this URL. So much about Orcarino in short. Let's have a look at the questions section. No questions yet. So let's start with the live demonstration part. So just give me a second. There we go. So now you can see a bit more. Well, here we have our demo Orcarino with a bunch of hosts already registered into Orcarino. You see here different hosts, different operating systems. And I now want to show you how easy it is to deploy a host with Orcarino. I just select create host here in our host overview list. Select a name, for example, Center West. Select an organization and a location I want to assign the host to. And on the host group, the corresponding operating system. So that's it. Now I can select submit. And our host is going to be deployed. And of course, we have a closer look. By opening a remote console. This would be here, and we see that our host already booted and will now deploy CentOS 7. Right. Let's return to this host later. During the deployment of the host, I want to show you a few more details, a few more fields we have here, which we can select right there. Yeah, so we have it here. So I already said I selected a name and an organization and a location. So you can group your hosts according to different organizations or locations. For example, you might have 2 data centers at different sites, so you can have multiple locations. You have your host group, which is nothing more than a container grouping all the setups for this operating system here together. So it contains all the information for the feeds down here. But what do we have here in detail? Well, we have our provider, so we want to deploy our host on our vCenter, VMware. We define a lifecycle environment which we can group our hosts to regarding software and patch management. So this is in the testing lifecycle environment. We have a content view, which is a snapshot regarding the software our host can install. I will show you this later. We have our content source, so our host will get our software from this orcharhino directly, and some configuration concerning Puppet and Salt setup, so configuration management. Regarding configuration management, we have here our Salt tab if we want to provision our host with Salt. Here's a Salt state selected, which will display a message of the day if we log into our host. We have our Ansible roles if we want to deploy Ansible roles to our host. We have our Puppet classes for Puppets. And here we have our virtual machine tab, where you can see how our VM is deployed. So the number of CPUs, the RAM, which cluster, which hard drive, 30 gigabyte hard drive. We have our tab containing information about the deployed operating system. So which architecture do we have? Operating system is CentOS 7. Which boot media we use, which partition table, PXE loader, so boot mode BIOS, and of course some more detailed tabs like configuration of the network interface, some additional parameters for deployment, and of course we could add some comment what our host is for. Considering general overview over orcharhino, we have here on the side our dashboard, which we can customize according to our needs. For example, we have a chart for Ansible, how many hosts are provisioned by Ansible, host configuration status overall, distribution chart for Puppet, and so on, and which we will use later. So let's have a closer look here. Our content tab, which is in fact Catalyst, so our patch and release management. In here we have our products, which contain our repository, so our software we want to deploy to our hosts. Let's wait a moment. We have quite a few products in here, so this is our test system, so it takes some time to load. Okay, so now we go. So we have our different products. For example, we have our CentOS 7 product. If we have a closer look in here, we see that this product contains all the repositories we need to deploy CentOS 7. So we have, for example, our LS repository, and in there are 10,000 packages. So these are, in fact, the repositories we can synchronize to the orcharhino and deploy to our hosts. We can in general use any repository we want as long as an RPM, Debian, or file repository. We can synchronize SUSE and Red Hat repositories by using SUSE or Red Hat subscriptions. And here we have our different life cycles. So just wait a moment. Right, here we go. So we can group our hosts according to different lifecycle environments. So we could have some development hosts, we could have some testing servers, or the most servers should be done in production, where we can first develop our software or code, then test it on a few selected hosts, and then provision all other hosts in our production environment with. And for that reason, we have so-called content views. So content views are nothing else than snapshots for a define of the repositories. So we freeze the repositories so that we can use this defined state in time to provision our hosts. So for example, we have a Composite Center 7 content view, which we have in the production, development, and testing lifecycle environment with, for example, this last published date. So we know when we had it and in which lifecycle environments we have it, and then we can use these content views, these snapshots of our repositories to provision our hosts. So let's have a closer look again at our host. So we see our host is now installing some packages. He's already in this almost finished. He's now installing the Puppet agent. So let's give him a few more minutes. And let's jump to this part, to the job templates. So we have our host tab here where we can browse all hosts registered to orcharhino. We have some general provisioning setup tabs like which architectures are configured in orcharhino, which installation media, operating system, partition tables, which we can assign to our hosts during deployment, or here, which we will look at now, the job templates. And here we have our job templates list. And there are quite a few in there. And now I want to show you how to use these job templates. At first, we need a test system. Let's pick one of the hosts here. For example, this one, we want to execute a job template. And how do we execute a job template on a host? Well, first let's select one. For example, this run command job template. Select run. And name the host. For example, this host, which is a Center 7 host already deployed. And what does this job template do? Well, nothing else than execute a command on the host. So let's just type in a generic command here, echo hello world. So let's print hello world. The standard output. So wait for a moment. And we see here our job template is going to be processed on one host, 100% success rate. Here's the name of our host. And if we select Send the SEM webinar here, we see the command line output, and indeed our hello world command is printed. And this is in essence what you have to know about job templates. They can be used to execute code on your hosts. This might be, for example, bash scripts, so you can use your own bash scripts in here and transform it into job templates, or Ansible playbooks. And this was quite a simple job template. So let's, for example, use a more advanced one. NVR code. And one example you might use in production is this /service pack upgrade. Let's have a look at this job template, and you see there's quite a few lines in there, and it can be used to upgrade a SUSE host to a newer service pack. So let's do this, because we don't need to know all the details in here, which are quite a few. We just need to know what it does and what input it needs. So let's return to this tab, select Run. And there is a mandatory input activation key. What is an activation key? Well, an activation key is, let's say, a shortcut to a list of products or repositories you want to deploy to the host. So a activation key contains the information which products and repositories a host should use. And let's update /15 Service Pack 2 host to a Service Pack 3 host. So we select this activation key for Service Pack 3 repositories and paste it in here. And I've already prepared corresponding SUSE host for this reason, which is this host. So we want to upgrade our SUSE Enterprise Linux 15 host from Service Pack 2 to Service Pack 3. So just check the input and submit. And this will take some time. So it's refreshing all his metadata from his repositories. And we will install the new packages and update to Service Pack 3. Let's return to this later. Just have a look at our test host, which is now deployed. So we have now a CentOS 7 - test host deployed, especially from orcharhino, which we can now use for a few more job templates. So we have two examples: a simple execute a command on a host via bash and upgrade a SUSE host via bash. But we can use, of course, an Ansible-based job template. Anyone who is familiar with Ansible might recognize this structure. You can paste in here an Ansible playbook, and define tasks which you want to execute on the host. So you can, for example, import a custom playbook here or use one of the playbooks predefined. This one, for example, will create a demo file on a host with at root and an input name, and will write into that demo file. And to show you that this works the same way as the other job templates, just click on run again. Select our new test host. Let's call this file test text. And here we have a drop-down where we can select our file input. Let's just select hello. So then run. Let's wait a moment. Now it's finished. Perfect. Took a moment. We see our tasks finished, and they changed content on the host. So let's check if everything is right. I already opened a shell to the host. Nice, our old webinar host. So let's open a new shell. So it was our simple7 ATX testers. So we are already in the root folder, and here we have our test file. I made this little mistake. I just typed the ending text, but it would have appended it to the file, so we have double here. However, see that the content of the file is what we selected previously. Right, so this works. Good. So far to the different types of job templates, so we can use Bash and Ansible playbooks. Now to much more fitting. Genau, so much more recent example. Because now we can use our job templates to patch our hosts. We can, for example, install single packages, as you can see here, or we can install errata on our hosts. So, for example, if we now look at our test host, we have some status properties here. We see here, we get a warning, security errata installable. So let's have a closer look at our host. What does this mean? It means that we have some security or bug issues, Right, so here we have our errata list. You can see there are quite a few erratas available for this host. So what's an erratum? An erratum is nothing more than an issue regarding a host. This might be bug fix, a security issue, or an product enhancement. And an erratum contains a package list, how to fix this issue. For example, close a security vulnerability. So, for example, we can pick this erratum here, which closes a kernel security issue, and then we can apply these errata to our host. So let's copy the erratum ID. And how can we deploy to a host? Well, we can use this view interface, but this is identically to invoking this job template called install errata Catello SSH default. We can again select our host. And then we can select our errata to install. And that's it. And our job template will automatically select the corresponding packages and update them for us on the host. And that's it. So with this job template, we can ensure that our host gets the erratum we want. And of course, we could deploy a list of errata if we want to, or for example, use a job template to patch all packages at once. So much about patching a host with job template. Of course, if we have a closer look in here, our job templates list, we have quite a selection of possible job templates, and we also have some job templates in here to configure Orcharhino itself. So if you, for example, want to configure a new operating system, you could, for example, use this job template here, which would configure your Orcharhino, for example, with a new, see here, with a new CentOS 8 or /15 or Debian 10 operating system. So far, so good. Let's return to our first job. Moment. Perfect. So we still have this one open. So as a /service pack upgrade and see what it does. So we see our service pack upgrade finished with access status 0. So everything seems fine. It says it restarted our host. It says / service pack upgrade successful. So let's have a look at this host we just upgraded. Here. Let's just open a console. We just see that our host is still booting, so still purging out kernels. And now the host is powered up. So let's log in. And let's have, for example, also look at our release file, and we see our host, which was previously on Service Pack 2, is now a Service Pack 3 host. So everything went as one would expect. So in summary, we have now used job templates to patch hosts, to patch specific erratas, to deploy hosts with specific erratas. We have used to, well, execute a generic command on a host. We have done this with Ansible playbooks and with bash scripts. And we have upgraded a host to a new service pack as SUSE host. So you see, these job templates are quite versatile. So this is now the end of my presentation. Let's have a look at the questions section. Are there any questions regarding job templates?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yeah.
Hi,
I
perfect.
can hear you.
So one question would be, what would be a really nice use case for some job template? So you showed us how we can upgrade some SUSE hosts, but are there some more real use cases to use them?
Yeah, of course. In essence, you can use job templates for any, let's say, use case you can imagine if you have bash scripts or Ansible playbooks for. So you can, for example, use your own custom Ansible playbooks. One use case I would imagine would be, for example, to repartition a host, which comes quite in handy. So you can, for example, um, write a bash script if you want to repartition a host, for example, enlarge your logical volume, then you can write a corresponding job template to do it for you. It's one I for example, use.
Ah, okay, yeah, very, very cool. Well, another question would be, how hard is it to write good job templates?
For that, let's just have a look. How hard can it be? Run. So this is the simplest job template you can write. This is one we used. So it is input command, which is defined here. And
Okay.
so it's quite simple to write basic templates. If you have closer look, for example, in the one we used for service pack upgrade, in the first one might be a bit overwhelming, but you can see in essence, this is a bash script. So if you're familiar with bash and you notice the steps you have to follow in order to, for example, upgrade a host in this case or whatever you want in area, you can just put them in here. You can define your own user input if you want to. There are some macros you want to use. If you want to go into more detail, you can always use the help in here. Which macros you can use is described in essence all here. And then you can enrich your bash script with custom user input. So it's really not that hard to write your own job templates. But of course, there are a whole bunch of job templates already predefined in here. So you might already find one suited for your problem or your use case.
Okay. Yeah, very cool. So one last question. Can I use every language in the job template, or do I have to use a quite complicated syntax of language?
Yeah, so that's a good one. You have to, of course, use Bash or Ansible syntax for that, and these macros you can use, they're written in Ruby, so it's a ERB template style, so it's quite readable, I would say. So if you have a closer look at some of the templates in here, what should we pick? For example, this one. So it's you can, for example, use this for as a basis if you want to, for example, define the shutdown process of a host, perhaps check a few um, services before you shut down your host. You can start, for example, this power action as its out default template and then customize it and see there has you have some input macros, which is here Ruby style, and of course a case. So when you define the action, you can define a restart, or if you don't define restart, it's a simple shutdown. So it's not that hard after all. Ruby syntax.
Okay, so
Bit of
it's inliner Ruby syntax, but I can really use every syntax to call later. So I can also use a Python script or something like that.
if you want to call it from them, of course.
Well, great. Well, so all the questions are answered, I think.
Perfect. So then let's stop the presentation for now. Okay. Then thank you for your time and have a nice day. Bye.